Welcome to the lecture for week 1, which covers Introduction to Information Systems and Information Technology. I'm Professor Marc-André Léger, and this course is the introductory level. So it's a business technology management course for undergraduate students. So keep in mind what we've mentioned in the previous online modules, that this is only an introduction. This is not a computer science course. This is an introduction for business students, undergraduates, first-year students who are starting to look into how information systems and information technology can be useful for organizations. So don't be disappointed if you're an engineering student or a computer science student who wandered on this video, which is also available on YouTube, and that you feel that this isn't at the right level for you. This is normal. So don't worry about that. What we want to cover in week 1 in this module is why we're looking into information systems, why this is something that's interesting to us. We're going to talk about computer-based information systems and how information systems impact organizations and why this is important. So the first thing, we have to understand some basic terminology of what it is that we're talking about. If you've watched the intro video before watching this week 1, so where we're actually starting to get into the meat of the subject, we started to introduce some of the important concepts. We did mention, however, that we're not talking about computer science. We're not talking about computing or computers. We're not looking at how you, as individual users at home or perhaps in previous studies, have been using information systems, information technology, computers as a tool to help you in your studies. We want to change your mindset. We want you to start thinking as business leaders, as managers, as to how this will be used by your business. So that being said, information technology is sort of a global term. So when we're talking about all these computer-based tools that we're going to be using in organizations, what that is information technology. So try to stop thinking about computers and how businesses use computers. Try to talk about information technology, and we're going to be using the acronym IT for information technology. But that's basically all of the equipment that we're going to be using. So you can think of information technology as the tools, as the hardware, as the equipment, but it's really a little bit more than that. So it's the whole thing together, and hopefully this will make a little bit more sense to you by the end of today's video. Another acronym that you're going to be seeing a lot in this course is IS, Information Systems. So information systems have to do with the system itself. A system being a group of different things that are working together. So when we talk about IS, we're talking about this tool which is used to help us manage information, in particular to collect the information, to process the information, to store it, to analyze it, and to disseminate, so to distribute this information in the context of an organization, but for a specific purpose. So there's stuff that we do, and in order to do these things, we're going to need some systems that are going to be working, so that are composed of many different parts, right? That's the idea of the system. So that's what we're going to be talking about here. The information system does include the technology. So IS includes IT. IT, particularly, remember, when we're talking about it in a strategic situation, like in the organization, we like to refer to it as business technology, or BTM. So business technology management, what's the title of this course and what it is that we'll be talking about. So IT, information technology, BT, information technology that is used in the business context, and IS, information systems. So to help us manage information. We need this because we're trying to get information to people so that they can do their jobs. But it's not just about getting information, it's getting the right information. So correct, validated, up to date, accurate information. And we want to get this information to the right people. So here what we're talking about is authorized, authenticated, validated users of our organization. These are the people we're trying to get information to. We want people who have the right to view the information, so who are authorized by us the information to use the information, who have a need to use this information in the context of doing a job that we're hiring them to do. So that is part of their roles and responsibilities within the organization. So that's what we're talking about here, of the right information and the right people. However, they need to get this at a particular time. They have things that they do, and in the context of doing these things, at certain points in their job, in their work, that's when they need the information. So it's also about making sure that the information is there at the right time for them. And then the other element is the right format. So the information has to be there in a way that it could be useful for them, that they can integrate it into the thing that they're doing, right? So that they can integrate that in the business process and the things that they do. And they can integrate that, or they can use that as part of making decisions, which is what we want them to do, what we need them to do in order to do a good job for us in our organization. So the right information to the right people at the right time, in the right amount, and in the right format, so that this information is going to support the business processes that they're trying to do, and it's going to help them to make good decisions for us. Right? That's the reason that we need information systems, the main reason that we need information systems in the organization. So we need to understand it, we need to contextualize it, we need to get some understanding of how this whole thing works. As a user, need to understand this, but not just understanding it as I mentioned before, as a person who's been using computers their whole life, but really as the organizational context. So how this is going to be useful in the context of the organization. So you got to be careful about that, right? Because you have some biases based on how you personally have been using it, which might be a little bit different of how it'll be used by organizations. You need to become an informed user, because really understanding what technology is and how technology is going to be useful to your organization is going to allow you to do a better job. It's going to allow you to be a better manager. It's going to allow you to better understand how this integrates within the context of the organization and how your organization is going to be using it. It's also going to help you to understand where this is going. So not just how we can use it today, but as a manager, you need to be thinking about the future. And so how are we going to use this in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years? How is this going to affect our value proposition? How is this going to position us to be a better organization in the future? When we're looking at maybe acquiring a new information system, this is going to take time. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. So if it takes 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years to put something in place, then you need to have foresight. So you need to think about, how is that going to work in the future? How is it going to help the performance of your organization? How is it going to affect the team working together to increase our efficiency and our productivity in the organizational context? So we're going to be using a lot of acronyms in this course. One of the acronyms that I don't think it's something that certainly not something that I use in everyday work, but is something that is definitely used in the context of this course. So the CBIS, the computer-based information systems. What we're talking about here is that, a system that helps us manage information doesn't necessarily have to be computerized, doesn't have to necessarily include a computer as part of it. But a big focus of what we're talking about here has to do with the information technology being mostly computer-based technology. So that's why we're talking about this acronym here. The computers are very useful, and as we talk about a little bit about the history of computers a little later on, and in the next week's module, we'll be talking a little bit about the history. So understanding how this has come to be. It wasn't always using technology. So some systems are manual systems. Some information stores that we have are paper-based. You just go at the library, you're going to see a whole bunch of information being stored and being distributed that has nothing to do with computers. But computers allow us to be a lot more efficient and doing it a lot faster and doing it in different ways and combining all kinds of different types of information together. So that's really one of the big focuses, particular that we're going to have, and something that we're going to be talking a lot about in this course. So we're going to talk about the different things that it can do for you. We're going to be talking about different types of information systems. We're going to see a lot of acronyms for that, and some of these are important to you because, well, there's a good chance that we're going to ask you questions about these in the final exam, and so you want to be prepared for that. Obviously, as students, it's something that you care a lot about, the exam. Me, as your teacher, I really care that you guys understand what it is that we're going to be talking about and how businesses can use them. So a few of these are pretty important. And in particular, ERP is something that we're going to be talking a lot about. Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. Again, here it's maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense to you, but in week 4 or 5, we are going to be spending a lot more time talking about that, and we're even going to be using one as one of the assignments in this course. We're going to be using SAP, which is SAP is a company name that makes a software, and the type of software that they make that they're very famous for is an enterprise resource planning system, or ERP, and we're going to be using that ERP as part of this course. So so these again, it's a lot that we're trying to build on these different areas. So hopefully this is going to start to make more sense to you as we talk about it more over the next few weeks. Understanding also how computer-based information systems are going to be supporting your employees in the context of the organization. And I'm sure you're very familiar with things like email or video conferencing. Certainly in the last year, with everything that's been happening in the world, we've been doing a lot of video conferencing and group meetings online, things like that. These are all different types of computer-based information systems that support employees in the context of the organization. So, information systems use data, and data is sorted, processed, or assembled so that we can create information from it. So data is ones and zeros, bits and bytes, right? Small amounts of data, and at the smallest level, we have the ones and the zeros. So the 1 and 0, the binary digits or bits, is the basic, atomic value of data. And we organize the data generally in blocks of 8 bits, which we have a name for. We call it a byte. These are, 8 bits. And as we have more bytes created, assembled together, structured, processed, organized, the bytes become words. And the words, again, contextualized, structured, organized, become information. So while data really doesn't mean very much, information has more structure and has more value to us. And when we can, apply knowledge, so we're really taking information and we're organizing it in a way that it means something. It has a lot of meaning to us, right? So we can apply the experience or the education, the things that we've learned, the expertise that we have to information, and then it can have a lot of meaning to us, and that's where knowledge. So as data becomes information, it has more and more structure. As information becomes more structured, it becomes knowledge. So we're starting with a lot of data, and a lot of data is becoming some information, and some information is becoming a little bit of knowledge. So as we go down, it becomes more and more structured, but at the same time, it has a lot more value to us because we can use knowledge to make decisions, and hopefully to make good decisions. The better the information is structured, the more it is organized, the more it makes sense, the better knowledge it becomes. So the more value it has to us as an organization, allowing us to reduce risk, because accurate information is going to help us to make better decisions. And so when we're making better decisions, we have less chances of getting it wrong. And risk is really about the possibility that we might get it wrong. So as data becomes information, has more value, as information becomes knowledge, it becomes very useful to us, it becomes very useful to the organization, and it reduces risk, and it allows us to be a lot better at what we do, so to be a lot more efficient and to be a lot more effective, right? Efficiency, to do more with less. Effectiveness, to be better at reaching our future goals. So again, these are important concepts for business school students, right? So try to remember this difference between efficiency and effectiveness. You can always and that's the beauty of doing this course on video. You can always just click rewind a little bit and listen to this a few times to make sure that you really get it, or maybe even to watch it, many times if you need to. Data, right? So numbers, that would be data. Text, words, that would be data. When we're structuring it together, it starts to mean something to us. So perhaps 3.16 really doesn't mean very much, could be anything. But if we add that in the context of the university, of school here, 3.16 is your GPA, your John Rosenberg. This has meaning to us. If you have a GPA of 1.39, like the third one here, Kyle, that's really not very good. Remember, we have 4.0 or 4.3 if you have an A plus average. But this 3.5, Tom Elias, that's like super good, right? So this means it can be translated into knowledge. In a university context, Tom Elias has probably really good job prospects. Certainly is going to get into a graduate school if he wants to do an MBA with 3.95, probably even do a PhD if he wants to, and will certainly be able to get some scholarships. So this is very useful information, and it becomes knowledge of what this could lead to in the future. So this is the difference between the data, the information. So I do want to remind you, when we're talking about information systems, we're talking about a group of things that are working together, right? And we're talking about the computer-based information system, and it has many different components, and we'll be talking about that more in next week's module. But it's the hardware, right? The equipment that we have, the software, what makes the equipment do stuff, the business processes, the procedures that we're doing, the databases, the data, the organized data in the form of databases, and then the network, how all of these things are connecting together. So these are probably the key things that you've got to take out of, or one of the key things that you have to take out of this week is how all these different things that we have that make this a system, and all these different things that are working together as in the organizational context. Inside of the organization, when we're talking about these business technologies and information technologies, we need to look at the whole different types of information systems that are out there and how these are helping us to do the different things that we're talking about. Now, if you remember from the early presentation on strategy, we introduced something called the value chain, right? And we said, these are the basic building blocks that you're going to need in creating an organization. Well, this is a different way to look at these basic business blocks, these different building blocks that we need to create the business. And so we have different kinds of systems that are part of these different organizational structures that we need to put in place. Some of them are infrastructure, so some of them are information technology platforms that we're going to be putting into place to help us to maybe manage, resources, manage systems. And we've got a couple different types of what we have as these columns in the temple here that we're showing. And these are the different silos. So this is how, early information systems were introduced inside of the organizations were typically done as silos. So systems with specific functions. And so we'd have an information system for accounting, the accounting IS, for finance, the finance IS, for production, operations, management. We have some other systems for management, for marketing, or for human resources. So these are our typical silos that, when information systems were introduced in organizations, this is typically how it would have happened. So over time, these became more integrated. And if you remember, I mentioned before the ERP, the Enterprise Resource Planning System. This is more of a system that will integrate what used to be these silos. But again, here, that's something that we're going to be talking a little bit more about in a couple of weeks when we go more in detail about the ERPs. So this gives you an idea of how, all these different systems that we're going to have. Now, at the top, what we're seeing, the business intelligence systems or dashboards, these are more management systems. So these are systems that are information systems that are going to be integrating data that's coming from a whole bunch of different sources, and which is specifically geared towards managers or people who are making decisions. So they don't necessarily need to always look at the detail, but they want to be able to get a good picture, the big picture, and to understand how this specifically impacts, and maybe use it to run some models, or thinking about maybe doing some scenarios to look at, okay, what if we did this? How would this impact the organization? These are the kinds of systems that we're talking here. And at the bottom, when we see the TPS, transaction processing systems, these are systems that are specifically designed to handle very high number of transactions. Typically, as users, if we'd be going to the bank to get some money, we'd be using an automating teller machine. These are systems that are built to handle a very high number of small transactions. Or if you're using a point of sale system, a POS, if you're going to a store and you're going to be buying something, the kind of system that you're going to be using is built to handle a very large number of small transactions, in this case purchases. That's this kind of system that we're talking about here, a TPS, or transaction processing system. So these are some of the things, the places where we're going to, and the type of systems that we're going to be seeing information technology inside of the organization. Information system does a whole bunch of stuff, and some of the key ones that certainly you need to keep in mind in the context of this course, and again, perhaps to help you prepare for the final exam. Performing high-speed, high-volume computations, calculations, doing this in a very fast way, in a very accurate way, allowing us to collaborate as well, being able to store very large amounts of information, but being relatively taking very little place. compared to the library. Storing all of the books in a digital format, takes only a few servers or a few hard drives. Storing all of the data the paper data that you might have in many different filing cabinets in your company would actually fit inside, a couple hard drives inside of your server room. So this is what we're talking about here when, large amounts of data, easy to access in a small space. It also allows you to do it in a very quick way, very inexpensive way. As long as you have a network connection, you can access it very quickly, very efficiently. And you can also use the information system and the data to automate some of the business processes. There's something called robot process automation, where RPA, where we could actually a lot of the things that we can automate relatively easily. So think of perhaps when you're going online to customer service and you're talking to a chatbot. You're not really talking to an actual person. You're talking to an automated business process, where perhaps eventually you'll be at some point be talking to an actual person. So this is going to affect the organization in many different ways. It's going to affect new industries, and there's something called creative destruction. The idea that sometimes industries are going to be radically transformed, perhaps even completely disrupted, even though in reality disruption is a lot more rare than we would like to think. Everyone is talking about disruption, but really most of the time we're talking about transformation. We're changing how an industry works, and definitely information technology enables this transformation, enables us to be a lot more efficient, enables us to need less people perhaps to do the same work, or enables us to take a job that is actually somewhat dangerous and have it done, by an information technology, perhaps a robot, perhaps mechanical machine connected to a computer, right? When we're talking about these kind of robotic arms in factories. So it's going to transform industries. And sometimes it'll create a whole new industry. We can think of Uber or Airbnb as something that didn't exist not that long ago, and that totally transformed the transportation industry, or totally transformed the hotel industry. So these are when we're talking about industries that perhaps disappear or that being radically transformed. Here in Montreal, the taxi industry used to be really huge. Since the arrival of Uber, it's been totally transformed. Perhaps in another 10 years, taxis, how we used to know them, won't even exist anymore. But there's going to be something else, right? So it's going to change how people work. It's going to change also how managers work. And it's going to affect people in a whole bunch of different ways. We're still going to need employees. When we bring robots inside of an organization, perhaps we need less workers, but we need people to program and to maintain these robots. So perhaps instead of having 20 people being paid minimum wage, we'll have one person who's being paid a pretty good salary, a pretty high salary, because of the knowledge and skills that this person needs to have. So we're going to need less people, perhaps, but these people are going to be doing different things. Hopefully things that are more interesting to them, that make them feel better about what it is that they're doing and how they're contributing to the organization and to society in general. And this is true of workers, it's also true of managers. So we yes, of course, if you're the person being disrupted, if you're the person who's losing their job, you're not really too happy about that. But we need to look at more of the big picture. There's jobs that used to be really, really dangerous that don't really exist anymore. There's things that people used to do that we can replace, and some are good and some are not so good. But it's evolving. So there's really not much that we can do about it. But as future managers, hopefully we could understand how we can do something useful for us and for our organization by using these technologies. So as you as a future manager, it's going to make you more productive. It's going to allow you to have a lot more people reporting to you. It's going to reduce the number of middle managers that you're going to be needing, which perhaps are not as productive overall when you're looking at it. But again, here's something that perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about, and probably when you guys get a better understanding of the role of management and and leadership in organizations, you'll see that while we have the higher up managers or the C-level executives that are really working at the strategic level, the middle managers are more at the tactical level. So not the big picture of where are we going, but the more of the day-to-day stuff. And so where strategy is a lot more critical and thinking about the success of an organization, tactical is also very important, because it's not just about the strategy that you have, but it's really about how good you are at actually executing this strategy. So if you can get managers focusing more on the important stuff, in the middle managers particularly, then you're probably going to be doing a lot better. So this is why when we're talking about reducing the number of middle managers as being something positive, because you can focus on the more important stuff and less on the day to day grinding of the wheel. So hopefully this is going to be a positive thing for organization. It's going to change how you make decisions as managers, because we have less and less time to do it, and so we need better tools to help us to do it. And of course, certainly in the very recent past, this has been a major issue, the idea of remote supervision. So being able to have people working all over the place, even creating a new type of worker that's emerged in the last few years, the nomad workers. Because in many cases, if you know how to use information technology, you can find the best person to do a specific job that you need as a manager. And it really doesn't matter where this person is. This person will be able to connect to you, because we have telecommunications, we have high speed, particularly with 5G coming out. We have very, very high speed data networks, so you can very easily speak to anyone, anywhere in the world, see them using video conferencing, share different information systems, share data in a very secure manner, so that you can have people working all over the place. And as we saw in the recent events of the COVID-19, a really good example how organizations who knew how to use the technologies relating to telecommuting and teleworking were very, very efficient and were not as much affected by the impact of this crisis as others have. I mean, obviously, if you're, retail sales and you need to be able to see someone that needs to be coming to your physical location to buy something, this might be an issue. But companies who were ready had in place all the tools so that they could very easily go to a more online or e-commerce type of model. So this is sort of the kind of thing that I'm talking about here, right? So having the technology, understanding how to use this technology, has a definite impact on how you're going to manage your. As a worker, as an employee, well, yeah, of course, there's jobs that are going to be lost. And losing a job is hard. And losing your job, in many cases, and certainly for us here in Canada, in Quebec, in Montreal, your job, what you do, is a big part of your identity, of who you are. So it's very common here in in our culture that when you're meeting someone for the first time, you're gonna ask them, well, what do you do, right? Who are you and what do you do? How do we define you, and your role and importance in society has a lot to do with what it is that you do. So this loss of jobs relating to technology is certainly an important thing. So it's part of something that we are going to be talking about in a few weeks when we talk about how we introduce technology in organizations. We'll talk about something called change management, and in particular resistance to change. This has to do with this idea that, new technology being introduced in an organization makes you feel alienated. Oh, hard word. Alienated, and loss of identity relating to who you are as an individual has a lot to do with what it is that you do. Then, of course, technology, focusing on a mainly technology job rather than a more physical, more hands-on kind of work. Definitely, there's different health issues relating to that, repetitive strain injury, carpal tunnel syndrome, or even vision issues. Certainly something that I had to deal with, when we did the switch over from, working at the office to a fully online working from home model. I had to spend a lot of time doing video conferencing and staring at a small portion of my screen. And I discovered that, we have to be really careful, because this actually led, in my case, to eye problems. I had to go see a specialist, and I had to rethink about. I mean, it's not a problem anymore; it's solved. But because now I understand it, but definitely I had to rethink how I work and how I use computers and how my desk and my environment and my screen are all set up. So these are the kind of problems that, health problems that didn't exist, 20 years ago or 50 years ago, and probably not even 2 years ago. So in some cases, a lot of psychological issues as well, right? Stress and depression, even relating to this whole transformation. But, also for other people, like, for example, people with disabilities, there's all kinds of new technologies. We have, systems that can allow you to read out a text to you so that you can hear it. If you're blind, you don't have to read it on the screen. You can have the screen read it to you. Even for people like me, this is great, because I love to use the audio versions or use software that allows me to convert journal articles that I need to read as part of my research. And instead of reading it on paper, I convert it to audio. And so when I'm flying or using public transportation, or on a long flight overseas, I can read, 3, 4 journal articles, because they're just being read to me. I have a little motion sickness sometimes in public transport, so I can't really read in the bus or in the train or on the plane, but I can do audio, right? But so imagine that for somebody who has a disability, this is great, right? Because it's great. It's not great that they have a disability, but it's great that we have these tools that can help them to try to find ways that, they can contribute doing what it is that they like or that they would like to do, because the technologies can help to alleviate some of the issues relating to their disability. So that's a really good for our society in a more general way. Definitely, information technology has had a very big impact on our quality of life. I don't know how many examples of technology we could have relating to healthcare, but things like pacemakers or all kinds of medical devices that we have that are becoming smaller and more portable and more powerful. We can think of telehealth, so that surgeons using robotic arms could perform an operation in the most northern part of Canada, while the surgeon is actually located here in Montreal at the nearby hospital here to the university. So this is definitely has significant impacts to our quality of life. Education, of course, being a professor, I'm going to say education is the most important thing. Education is your future. Education is important to the competitiveness of our nation. And there's definitely all kinds of uses for technology in education. Certainly for research purposes, we have access to so much information using the computer, accessing the library, journal articles that are all being they're all available in electronic format. And certainly, again, with the recent COVID issues, that the pandemic flu that's been going around, and that I'm sure will be happening again in the future. We can do education remotely. We can have people in all over the world taking a class right now with us at Concordia, but who are physically. I mean, last semester I had a student who was listening in to my classes from Vietnam, others from China, other students from the US, other from the African continent, all of these in the same class, all of these in the same conference. And that might even be the case here today. So definitely this is a great thing. I took a class at MIT a couple years ago. Did a certificate at MIT and did the whole thing online. Wonderful. Banking, well, with the good and the bad, of course. And banking is great. You can do all your banking online. I don't really remember when's the last time I actually had to physically go to my bank. It's very rare. I go maybe once or twice a year. But of course, there's risks associated to that, and certainly cyber criminals have been certainly taking advantage of the fact that banking is done online. But because I also work at a bank, I know that we're working very hard to try to mitigate all of these risks to make sure that banking is safe for all of the customers of the banks. But definitely, this has transformed our life. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you'd have to go spend, half a day standing in line at the bank to do transactions. Today, you don't need ever really. Maybe even if especially with the most recent changes that have been going on, there's all kinds of new services now that are done online using banking. Teleworking, I already talked a lot about. Social media, right? Social media, it's changed my life, and I'm sure it's changed most of your lives, because now we can, we can stay in touch with our friends. Doesn't matter where they are. But then, of course, with the good, there's the bad side. There's always a flip side to this. Social media has also created some issues, and some of them we'll be talking about in later in the semester when we talk about privacy or security or sexual exploitation, money laundering, fraud. Some of these things relate to social media and things like bullying. That are not necessarily, that are certainly not positive. But, there is the positive. There's the fact that we can know about things. We can know about people. We can interchange. I have a friend who moved to Denmark many years ago, and I have a lot of contacts with this person, probably more than with my neighbor, because of social media. And this is great. This is a person I like and I enjoy, and I want to know what they're doing. Cryptocurrencies, think Bitcoin. It's totally transforming the banking industry. It's creating new, very interesting opportunities. There's also something called financial technologies, referred to as fintech, who are creating new business opportunities, who are transforming the business world. Something that you should know about, you need to learn about. That's going to have an impact on you guys when you graduate in the next few years. It's already a big thing now. It's going to just get bigger and bigger. So cryptocurrencies, so virtual money, and fintech, financial technologies. So the ability to do all kinds of financial related things, businesses, transactions using technology. AI, artificial intelligence, which includes things like machine learning, deep learning, text recognition, visual recognition, facial recognition, using computers, fast computers, in a way that gives us the impression of some kind of intelligence behind it. It's not real intelligence. It's not people or animals. It's something artificial. It's a computer that's there. And here, of course, there's all these movies, and as computers get faster and faster, we're going to start to see things that perhaps are looking artificial intelligence, making it look like some of the things we see in movies. Hopefully, it won't be like the Terminator 2, but definitely artificial intelligence is becoming very important and is enabling some capabilities, and it's going to be transformative. It's going to change society. And robotics, getting robots to do stuff that we don't do, boring stuff, dangerous stuff, right? So this is definitely transforming society. So hopefully you got something from this week one module. So I do want to point out to you that on Moodle, you're going to have a lot of access to some reading materials. There's also going to be some other videos that I'm recommending, perhaps some of them online, that I'm recommending that you might want to go watch if you want to learn a little bit more about this. And definitely, if you haven't already, you need to look at the book. You need to read the course book. So hopefully you've purchased it already. This is week one, so maybe not. But you could probably find a used copy of the book, or you can buy it new online, probably from the bookstore. Is a good way to go at it. So I more than strongly urge you to go out and buy the book. Just watching these videos is not going to be enough to do well in this course. You definitely need to get the book and to read the book and to look at the other material and perhaps to use the forum. And on the forum, you'll be able to interact with me, with other students, with our TA. So hopefully this is going to help you to do well in this course. Thank you very much.